all for coming. My name is Bill Swann, and I want to make this totally interactive. If anybody has a question or comment, please interrupt or add it to the process. This is being videoed today, so be on good. Will you pan the audience? And
I will. Thank you for taking 2 hours out of your time to put this together.
Absolutely. Well, I'm retired. I've got plenty of time. So I'll start with, actually, Tristan, could you turn off that switch in back of you? And I'll start with this PowerPoint. And maybe it won't, this is sponsored, if you will. Excuse me, how do I keep this from being automatic? So this is HREG. Everybody knows about that. 2 of the people here are volunteers with HREG this summer. Actually, maybe I'll have a quick go around and see what anybody would like to introduce themselves and comment about what they'd like to take away from the class or add to the class, as the case might be. Any takers? Tim?
Tim Locke. I've got a little group of my own called Houston Climate Protection Alliance. I'm really concerned, having lived through 2 periods of 2 weeks each without power after we got hit by a hurricane here in Houston. I'm really concerned about coming up with some sort of power source that makes my living in Houston a little bit more survivable than those kinds of outages.
Are you talking about air conditioning?
Air conditioning and food and refrigerator.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Anybody else? Okay. Yes, sir.
My name is Derek Huey, and I just want to learn more about solar and how to use it.
Sure. Well, I'll arm you with some good knowledge today, I hope. Anybody else? Yes, go ahead, sir.
I'm Nasser Al-Nahas, and like everybody else, I want to learn more about this new technology and see if it works for me, my new home that I'm building, and be ready by December so we can get a solar system.
Great. Anybody else? Yes?
I'm Brian. I'm one of the volunteers, and I know I support a lot of renewable energy, but I don't know much about the technical aspects, so that's what I'm here for. I'm here to work.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'll start by this slideshow. This is a slide I ran across, and if you take all the water in the oceans and condense it to a single sphere, that's what the big sphere looks like. And I was a little bit surprised when I saw it, so I actually did the math. We know the diameter of the Earth. We know 70% is covered with water. The average depth of the ocean is 2 miles, and the diameter of that sphere is about 8,000 miles, and with it, 800 miles, and with it superimposed on the picture of the United States, that's about right. I mean, the math is pretty straightforward. Not only that, the interesting thing, liquid fresh water, and there's a third dot that you can't even see, freshwater lakes and rivers. I assume liquid fresh water is what's bound up in the poles, the North Pole and the South Pole. But, when they talk about water scarcity or water being so abundant, this sort of puts it in perspective, especially the freshwater part. This is a friend that is living off grid southwest of Houston, and this powers his water pump. These 2 panels right here, and he has I think he told me he had a 250-foot deep water well, and then he put the panels to power his small refrigerator on the ground. I guarantee you, I would at least tilted them up, right, at the latitude, because there's a little bit more energy to be harvested. And then this is a picture of one of the trackers in my backyard, and I've got this little off-grid system right here, and this is going to move every 15 minutes. This would normally, let me get back to this, cause this panel to rotate. This is a tracker. And so I'll be interrupted every 15 minutes. And it's running off the battery right now because there's no sunlight in here. right? But it keeps up, the battery keeps up quite well. Here, let me give you a handout. There you are. Whoop, wrong one. Thanks. Have a seat.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and that's my dog there. Is that do I need this microphone? No, I don't. I'm not. Did we turn it on?
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay. Okay. So what is this? Where's the speaker?
What's that?
Is this going to a speaker or going to you?
Wireless.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
And this is a single axis tracker.
This is a single axis tracker, and I'll talk about single versus double axis a little bit. All the solar farms going in today are single axis.
His wheel is 110 volts.
This is actually puts out 220 volts, and
His well,
yeah, and I'll show you that.
50 foot. I have a well that's 300 foot.
Mhm.
That's very interesting.
Well, for a well, I think they're generally DC, but you'll have to speak to somebody who provides a solar pump for wells to find out the specifics. I wish I knew more about it.
It's AC.
What you got is AC, but this picture right here is most likely DC.
See, and I was curious if you could pump it at that depth. Mine's like
Yeah.
300 foot.
Yeah.
That's,
Well, this guy told me it was 250 foot deep, but I should know more about that. I apologize, I don't. So this is the top of IKEA. They have a little less than 3,000 panels there. It's like a sea of panels. Of course, looking at it from the bird's eye view, there's a lot of vacant space, and they avoided all the skylights and the piping and so on and so forth. This is a solar farm in just east of San Antonio. This is 4.8 megawatts, and there's 480 towers in this field, and I'll show you a picture of the tower in a moment. San Antonio has put in 500 megawatts in the San Antonio area. Some of them may be remote from San Antonio, but they own the power company, and they know what they pay for power in the late afternoon when everybody's air conditioning is on, and they chose to do 2-axis trackers, and I'll show you a picture of that. More on this in a minute. This is the 50 megawatt solar farm in Alpine, Texas. I've got another slideshow for that. So this is a picture of one of the trackers in San Antonio, and this is a 2-axis tracker. This is the motor that causes it to go like this, and that big actuator causes the panel to tilt. And you can calculate very easily the azimuth and the elevation of the sun, elevation off the horizon, and azimuth due north being 0, 90, east is 90 degrees, so on and so forth. So, I mean, I can even do that math on this little $5 microcontroller in the box right there. This is another one of the solar farms in San Antonio. This is azimuth elevation also, except in this case, the east to west rotation is like this, and then the panels do like that to compensate between winter and summer. And this is called, instead of an azimuth elevation tracker, it's called a tilt tip tracker, because it tilts east to west and tips to compensate for winter and summer.
Bill,
Yes, sir.
so is this automatic tilt, or is that something recommended?
No, it's automatic. Oh, even this is automatic.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's automatic too. You know, they don't want anybody to, turn a hand crank or whatever the case may be. Yeah.
Your little screen is flashing messages, which I hadn't noticed before.
You mean inside here? Yeah, I'll read that to you a little bit later.
Okay.
I mean, it's displaying the time and da-da-da-da-da. So this is, more on this, but this is my consumption for one date a couple of years ago. This is 24 hours, and this is when I turned my coffee pot on. And this is when my solar kicks in, and note, I've stopped bringing energy through the meter. This graph only shows what comes in the house. It doesn't show what comes out of the house, and it could, but they haven't. But the graph would be down here during that interval of time. And in order to get this data, everybody has a smart meter that reports your consumption every 15 minutes. And you go to Smart Meter Texas and tell them if you want, well, you can look at your data, I believe. No, I guess you have to register. I don't remember, but you can look at your data.
So you said everybody has a smart?
Yeah, in the Houston area, yeah. And a smart meter, it just has a display on it, right? It doesn't have a wheel that turns?
Right.
Yes.
Do you feed into the grid in your system?
In my case, I do, yeah.
And you get credited for
Yes, and I'll explain that a little bit more. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, if you didn't have a solar panel, what would be?
Yeah, there would be more blue in this area because I'm still using power during the day. But in my case, my solar is overwhelming the little power that I use. I mean, it might not overwhelm my air conditioner, and I'm going to show you another chart in a minute on that. Now, this was a test tracker put up by CenterPoint. It's at the Bel Air Service Center. You can pull off next to the railroad tracks and park in the parking lot and see it in the distance. And you can't see it very well, but there's another fixed array in the back, and they wanted to compare tracking to fixed. And you know, you can predict in advance what the additional gains are. But what they didn't, when the shadow of the high voltage wires way up in the air fell across the array, they saw a dip in production. You know, and they knew that, but they didn't know how much. This is called the red one. Is that?
Oh, I'm guessing that the temperature is the reddish one.
So there's a variation in temperature.
Yeah. Yeah, there've been some significant changes. We remember the longer minimum back in the medieval times. The temperature has bounced around.
Right. 280 ppm pre-industrial. Really, that's controversial.
So you're suggesting the blue line is
Yes,
ppm.
They started meaning Charles Keating is the guy who made a Scripps Institution measuring 58.
Yeah.
It's 280.
Yeah. The takeaway here is until the industrial age, where we started burning a bunch of carbon, which I call ancient stored solar energy. That's an appropriate term, right? Because carbon is sunlight that's been in the form of primarily sea life, phytoplankton, but it's been constant forever. But this is called the hockey stick. There's a man that coined the term, Michael Mann, and if you want to see more about, you know, there's many phenomena that are happening today that look like a hockey stick, and there's a wonderful website called Anthropocene. .info, where you can see a lot of the other things that are varying in this fashion. And I might add that the people that name eras, some really arcane group of individuals that understand why you name an era, the Holocene, the Pleistocene, they've voted almost unanimously to rename the era we're in now the Anthropocene, because we are changing the climate by our putting so much CO2 in the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. This is called the duck curve. Let me make sure it's not going to. This is taken from California, and you know, in 2013 they didn't have much solar, but they're estimating in 2030 this is megawatts from conventional power sources. It'll have to drop down significantly because there's so much solar generation going on. And this is called the duck curve. And, you know, this is predicted by 2020, but they're going in that direction. This is a large ramp up in the need for power when the sun goes down, but people still have their air conditioning running. And in some circles, this is problematic, this need to ramp up power production. And, you know, the gas-fired generators, natural gas-fired generators, can be ramped up. The baseload generators, coal and nuclear, and whatever else I'm missing, are baseload. They run at constant output, more or less. So the other thing that can possibly remedy this is the use of batteries. You charge batteries when you've got plenty of sunshine, and then you discharge the batteries when the sun goes down, decreasing that peak over there. And batteries are coming on real strong, I have to tell you. And then this, of course, is ERCOT is the Energy Reliability Council of Texas. Is that right? Energy Reliability Council of Texas. They manage the grid in Texas. And I just am showing this. This is the curve. You can go on the ERCOT website and see the demand curve. This was for whatever day I took it. And the top curve is the available power, and the bottom curve is the actual power. And I also put it there because the marginal fuel costs vary for wind and solar and hydro is zero because there's no fuel involved, right? The wind blows, the sun shines. Whereas down here at coal, you're paying a cost for there's a fuel cost involved. Okay.
That doesn't include externalities, what they call externalities.
Externalities. Would you explain externalities?
Well, it's all the pollution that
Yeah.
we're dealing with now.
It's all the health due to poor air quality and
Ocean's 30% more acidic than it was 30 years ago.
absolutely, absolutely.
And CCA for almost 30 years. And watch this happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oysters
Are all in yeah.
and we lost them, a lot of them because of Ike. They dumped a bunch of silt and they haven't come back.
There's a lot going on that's bad. There's no.
And they just decimated the only ones we had viable here in the upper coast in Christmas Bay this year. They came out of Louisiana because everything shut down over there.
Yeah. So I made, this is a 50 megawatt solar farm in Alpine, Texas, and I visited out there several months ago. The city of Houston's agreed to buy the power from this farm for 20 years. And this is 350 acres. It's a heck of a trip out there if you take the train, which I did. And let me see. Oop, that's the wrong way. How come I'm not seeing anything here? I don't know why I've got a blank. I guess I have a blank slide in there. This is a earlier on view where they hadn't put panels on a lot of the trackers. They put the posts in the ground, but they hadn't put the panels on. This is a picture of the label on the back of a panel, and this is a 315 watt panel. It has 72 squares on it, the part number at the very top. And one thing that was interesting is it was made in Turkey. You know, people talk about where the panels come from. Well, they come from all over the world. Turkey, China, Far East, Mexico. And they're talking about putting a tariff on everything but American-made panels and.
Are there panels made in the U.S.?
Yes, there are. I can name one company, Mission Solar in San Antonio. This is a picture, I found this of interest because I'm a mechanical engineer. What you're looking at here is, this panel right here is about this big, about the size of this panel right here, not very big. And it is providing the power to turn this motor, and there's a box right here where they have a battery in there. The other thing of interest is that motor feeds a worm gearbox. That gold thing is a worm gearbox. And you have to ask, why do they have the bent pipe there? And the bent pipe is there to get the center of gravity. There's 40 panels out this way and 40 panels out that way. The bent pipe is to get the center of gravity, you know, the line where all that weight seems to be, on the axis of this actuator. Otherwise, that motor would have to work because it's not just pure rotation. It's lifting, you know, a load that's off center, so to speak. So this is, you'll see this everywhere. And this is another picture. This is a 2 megawatt inverter. You've got to change the panel voltage to, in this case, 35,000 volts. This feeds the grid actually at 69,000 volts. There's another transformer, but this is a huge inverter made in San Antonio, I might add. And this is, I put this on here because that's a shock absorber. And, you know, there's wind-induced vibrations. You know, maybe you've seen a sign flutter sometime if the wind's blowing in the right direction. I have a little video, one of my Venetian blinds was fluttering the other day. And I took a picture of it in slow-mo, and you can see it doing that. Excuse me, let me kill
Picture
that.
of an automobile bridge doing this, and it destroys itself.
That's the, quit. Oh, come on. Okay. Anyway, that's the story. Let me see, I might have one more. I got one more. They actually pounded these columns into the ground, one every 30 seconds or so, and went about putting it all together. And you'll note there's slots to adjust, to compensate for misalignment, slots in 3 dimensions. This is a solar farm in Sealy, and they had a wind burst a month ago or so, and it took out 10% of the farm. And you can go visit this. It's called, you just Google local sun energy, and there's a contact button. You can contact Joey, and he'd gladly give you a tour of the place after they fix it. And they're going to fix it pretty soon, I think. It's local sun energy. Just Google that at the very top. I mean, I could probably Google that right now on Google Maps. So that's that slideshow. Let me kill that. Oh, come on. Okay. So this is the handout. I probably meant to say some other things, but I forgot. So this is my backyard. And, you know, I decided to build some trackers. I have 40 panels, 9,000 watts, and my energy bill last year was less than $50. Good thing. And this is a picture of a house that overlooks downtown, and that pergola is about 40 feet in the air. And this gentleman that owns the house wanted to put solar on the pergola, and he did. And I'm going to go by and look if we have a hurricane, because this is probably exposed to more wind loads than my array in the backyard, you know, because there's clean air looking toward this house, and he has 5,000 watts on the roof. And I asked him, how much was your bill? He said it was minus $450.
Back to wind loads on that one. That looks like the pergola is almost horizontal.
Yes, it is.
And my first imagining is that wind loads would be fairly minimal on that structure.
Yeah.
Tilted up.
Absolutely. You can't see it, but there's a roof that's, here's the pergola, and there's a roof that you can't see that's sloped up. So this is a funnel. The air that comes under the pergola will be funneled upward, and, you know,
That would lift the pergola.
it might put some wind loads on the bottom of the panels. Yeah. And I mentioned this guy, very efficient house, Green Mountain bill minus $450, and they owe him $450. The deal with Green Mountain is when you feed the meter backwards, you get paid what you pay. And this is optional. This is not mandatory in the state of Texas.
Exactly the same?
Yes, sir. One for one. In and out, yes. There are about 5 local power companies that do that, and I'll show you where you can, well, I'll show you right now. Let me,
You said your system's how many kilowatts?
9,000.
9,000.
Yeah.
But you still paid some.
Yeah, I paid a little bit last year, and let me,
40 panels?
I have 40 panels, yeah, about 9,000 watts. I'll just go into Google Maps. And I guess, I don't know why, I'm going to try to find IKEA. I think it's right there. And Swann, I think it's right there. And you can see the panels there on the IKEA store. That's where I got that screenshot from. If you go over to San Antonio, I think, yeah, here's the solar farm in San Antonio right there. And I just drove in the back way and through an open gate and parked myself here and took those photographs that I showed. The biggest array in, oh, let me see whether I can find the one in Sealy.
Would they be selling some of the older panels that might still be serviceable after the wind burst?
I don't know whether he's going to try to reuse them or where is Sealy anyway? Oh, there it is right there. And this solar farm is right there, local sun energy. And this is 1.5 megawatts. And the arrays that were destroyed by the wind are in this corner and down here a little bit. But I will have you fire up the computer if you haven't and Google PV watts. This is a NREL website, National Renewable Energy Laboratories, and this is where you can estimate how much solar you can put on your roof or backyard and how much it'll save you on your electric bill. So go to PV watts and then type in your address at the top. Would somebody like to give me an address and I'll type it in? I can use mine if nobody wants.
You use mine.
Yes, sir?
861
861. Yep.
Pebble Bank.
How do you spell that?
P-E-B-B-L-E.
P-E, Pebble Bank, P-E?
Pebble Bank.
P-E-B-B?
Yeah.
L-E-B-A-N.
And change that first B to a B.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Pebble.
Oh, B, P, yeah. P. Is that got it? B-A-N-K.
Yeah.
And then
Lead City.
League City. Let's see whether that works. Okay, it's searching for the weather data, you know, because weather, they say weather is local. And so it's comparing it to a database for what the expected insolation is from the sun, right? We have clouds, they don't have clouds in West Texas. So if you type in your address, if somebody else, anyone else would like to do that, I'll wait a minute. Yes, sir.
770.
Oh, no, on your computer.
Oh.
Yeah. But or pay attention. You can do this. I'm going to cover the important things. So I typed in an address, and I'm going to scroll over and hit the bar on the right. Go to the system info, and this is defaulting. Let me pull this slider back over here. This is defaulting to a a 4,000 watt system. You see the 4 up there? But, and I'll explain a little bit of this, but let me go look at your house. Now, if you click on this map on the right, it'll show the address listed. Now, is it this house right here? Okay. So, I see a south-facing roof right here, right? And I see this is not exactly, this is not facing, this is facing east right here. So it's ready for me to draw some lines on the screen. And I'll explain in just a minute how you would handle this particular house. You note I'm keeping the lines away from the ridge. The fire code needs to provide a little bit of distance so the firemen can walk along there in case there's a fire. And obviously you don't want the panels to overhang the roof, so I'm kind of going to drag this down. And I'll hit the save button on this. Now, what I wanted to point out is you have that section of the roof is, the azimuth is probably 200 degrees, south being 180 degrees. So I'm going to key in 200, and I'm going to estimate the elevation of the roof. I'll just put 20 degrees or something like that. But in your case, you would have to do this twice because this other section of the roof, yeah, the east side, and you'd have to key in, I'd say, you would draw a rectangle on that and key in 100 degrees because it's not facing east. It's a little bit more than east, and you'll key in the slope there. But so you'll have to do this twice in your case. But I'll save this, and it said that based on that area, I can put in 2.6 kW. That's about 12 panels. And we're going to go out and look at a panel in a minute. And then let me explain these. I'm sorry?
What's the size of one panel? Standard size?
Roughly 3 by 5. 3 foot by 5 feet. I've got one out in the truck. We'll go take some voltage measurements in a second. So what I wanted to explain here, a couple of real important things. Remember I said you had to key in the azimuth and elevation. Well, I'm going to stick with 20 degrees, but I'm going to say this is 210. Is that what it was?
We said 200 or 210.
Okay. 200. But I want to point out the well, first off, let me explain the system losses. This is saying that this conversion efficiency is 86%. 100 minus 14 right here, this number right there. And I just want to explain very briefly all the parameters that go into figuring out that efficiency. Soiling, panels get dirty. They're assuming that 2% of the energy is lost due to soiling. They're assuming that the shading is 3%. Well, if you don't have shading, if you don't have any trees, change this number to 0 right here. Maybe not, let me see, will it take 0? No, on another sheet you can change the numbers. This is just an explanation of them. Snow, no snow in Houston. Mismatch, 2%. And I'll explain that in a little bit. Wiring losses, 2%. Connection losses, 0.5%. The reason wiring, copper is expensive. And so you don't want to put too much copper wire, but too little copper wire that you get significant heating going on, resistance in the wires. So that's there's a happy, and usually they say keep the loss to 2%. Now you're a retired electrician, right? You have to size wire for the amps, and I'll kind of explain that a little bit.
Excuse me, when you're saying too much wire, is that like the thickness or diameter of the
Yeah,
wire?
yeah.
Not how long it is?
Well, it's both. It's the if you want me to, I can explain that. There's a way, of estimating. I'll try to do that, or see me after class. I mean, it's pretty. Are you technically inclined by any chance?
I'm an engineer,
Okay, well, in that case, it'll be easy.
not an electrical,
Well, I'll explain it to you. Yeah. So the advanced parameters are very important, and it is, when you put a system in, you're competing with your existing supplier of energy. And this is defaulting to 11 cents per kilowatt hour. That's the statewide average. If you pay 6 cents per kilowatt hour, you need to put in 6 there. And what happens, I'll show you on the next page. Let me scroll over here. On the next page, this is the payback. So this is the amount of radiation kilowatt hours per meter squared per day times the system size to get from this column to this column, and this is times the cost of energy to get what you save per year. And of course, the amount of insulation changes depending on the month. It's higher in the summertime and less in the wintertime. And let me kind of show you something right here. The numbers on the left column are called sun hours, and it says 4.76. And what I want to explain is, like, this is the intensity of the sun, and this is the sun rises here, and there's an imaginary line where this area equals this area, and this area equals this area, and this time is sun hours. And for Houston, even though the panels are out there for 12, 14 hours, it's as though the sun is bearing down directly on the panels, stationary, for 4.76 hours. That's a good number for Houston. You can, okay, if you will, thank you. So, yes,
That's a very stupid question.
okay.
But does the solar panel only respond to sunlight, or is it heat also?
Heat,
Cloud cover, but it's hot as hell outside. Does it respond to that?
heat is a bad thing.
Okay.
There's a factor about how solar panels produce less energy as they get hot. And I can't tell you what it is, but it's 2 or 3%. But you can't do anything about that. If you put panels on a roof and you leave a large gap, convection will carry away some of the heat. If you put the panels, I mean, you'll see this panel in my truck is very, very hot because it's sitting in the bed of the truck and the sun's bearing down on it, and that heat doesn't have anywhere to go. So I have one friend who put the panels this far off the roof of the house, right? Because he really wanted to not get losses due to temperature. Now, the other part of your question, I believe, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, there's monocrystalline and polycrystalline panels as well as amorphous. Okay. I think that's monocrystalline. I'm not sure. There's one other kind of panel that's more apt to be used in England where they get more clouds, but poly or monocrystalline is what we use here, and it just responds to direct sunlight. Okay. Now let me.
Before we leave the
Yes, sir.
temperature thing, does it make a difference in terms of the temperature of the panel if it's sitting on over a metal roof as opposed to an asphalt roof?
I would. The metal or asphalt roof is going to re-radiate. Well, first off, it's going to be shaded where the panel is. My 2 cents. Thermal conduction is better in metal than asphalt. So it may well be, and I may be wrong, that you're shading the roof where the panel is, but heat is conducting in because there's a slight difference in temperature, because it's not seeing the radiation. There's a delta T between the shaded area and And so I would say, in a sense, maybe asphalt is better because, you know, that heat that conducts in re-radiates and causes the panel to get hotter, right? But I haven't, that's just my 2 cents.
That sounds like a good guess. I'm thinking about situating the panels on top of my carport.
Mhm.
It's a metal roof.
Mhm.
And we've got a temperature sensor out underneath the carport, which almost always shows 2 to 5 degrees hotter than the Houston Airport advertised on TV.
Mhm. Yeah, it's because of radiation. If you were to shield the sensor from radiation, you know, you could go put a piece of cardboard above the sensor and see whether that is the source of additional temperature. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I mean, that would be an interesting thing. Yeah.
I'm going to try to thank you.
Okay, so what did I say? This was how many kilowatts was that one? You remember I drew that area? 2.6. Okay, I want to show you the economics of solar now, and this is very important. So 2.6, 2600 watts. And a conservative $3 per watt. That's a conservative, that's what the installers, you can find an installer that will install for $3 a watt. And then I'm going to multiply this times 0.7 because there's a federal rebate of 30%. So you're only paying 70% of the system cost.
It's a tax credit, which means you got to have taxes.
That's right. It's a tax credit. You got to owe money to the government, and it reduces that tax liability. And a lot of people, that doesn't work for a lot of people.
That's a little retired.
Yeah. So if somebody would do the math right here, let me see. Has anybody got a calculator going?
5,460.
I'm sorry?
5,460.
5460. So this is the dollars that you plop down, and you save $381 per year. You know, 381. This is kind of the economics of the thing. Well,
14.3 years.
14.3. Okay, he took 5460 divided by 381. And this was approximately 14 years to pay for itself. Can you do the reciprocal of that? 381 over 5460 equals maybe 9%?
I got 7%.
7%, okay. That's the return on investment, right? This is like you buy a stock and you expect dividends. Also called the price to earnings ratio, but this is a good ROI right here. Now, let me just mention something else real quick. I'm going to talk about the different ways of converting power to usable 220 volt AC. I use these, one per panel. This is a microinverter. The DC voltage from the panel comes in right here.
Micro what?
Microinverter. It's from a company called Enphase. They were the first to sell these.
Light switch over there.
I'm sorry, yeah. So the DC power comes in right here, and this thing is called a trunk cable. And normally you'd have up to 17 of these receptacles on this cable, and you could connect 17 panels into this trunk cable, and then this plugs into a 220 volt outlet right here. This is 220 volt AC. So I said I use $3 a watt up there, yet panels and microinverters are under $1 a watt. You know, that's what the cost is, probably even less to the installer, because he gets volume discounts. So I always encourage people to take an active role in speccing out and installing a system because, you know, if the essential stuff costs $1 a watt, the return on investment is somewhat higher and you're not paying yourself for the work of installing it, right? That's what I'm saying. Now, for some people that's not appropriate, but nevertheless, I had to mention that. Okay. Let me see. I'm all tied up here.
Now, of course, this system does not include any storage, right?
That's correct.
So this is,
You know,
it's an on-grid system.
yes, but I generate more power, almost as much power as I use, and I feed a lot back to the grid and get paid for it. In a sense, you can consider the grid as a battery because I feed it back during the day and I get it back at nighttime when the sun's not shining, right? But no, it's not batteries yet.
Did you say the name of the manufacturer of that?
This is in phase. In phase, yeah. And I don't, well, I guess, let me see, what time is it anyway? Okay, let's go over some of this and then we'll go out and look at panels. Everybody kind of clear on the sun hours? You know, this number is tabulated for every city in the world. And I'll leave that up there in case anybody wants to. So I have pictured here 3 kinds of systems. Couple disconnect. This is required by CenterPoint. You know, you have to, in the notes there's a link to where you see what they require, but they require a lockable disconnect. They also require a label on here saying you got renewables, which they put on there.
Sorry to interrupt, but you said CenterPoint, is it because they own the distribution system?
Right.
So no matter who's my electricity company,
Yeah, everybody has to put a lockable disconnect in. Now, I have to say that it's not required in California. They've been doing it a whole lot longer. And CenterPoint initially was concerned that if the grid went down, you could be feeding power back onto the line and shock the lineman, right? But the fact is, an inverter, whether it be a microinverter or a string inverter, has to sync with the grid. It has to be in sync, right? If you lose the grid signal, these things stop producing. End of story. So in California, they're more, you know, used to, or their policies are different. But it is the law here for now. And so microinverter system, lockable disconnect. Oh, and by the way, you should always feed the power in down at the bottom. There are 2 bus bars in here, and if somebody wants, I won't bother to explain, but I can explain later. So the point I want to make here is you can start with one of these for $210. This is when I did the math, this was a 250 watt panel and a microinverter, and the cost is $210. And I don't remember whether that was before or after the federal rebate, to be honest with you. So just remember that. Now, you also presumably have to put rack up enough, and I'll talk about racking enough to where you're going to grow to. I could only afford 4 panels on my first system, so you know, I built, you know, 4 to 40 over a long period of time, but I had to plan for the racking that mounts the panel to the roof, yeah. So, but just remember this, $210. Now this is the typical type of system that has been put in forever, but it's not being put in as much today. This is called a string inverter. And panels are connected in series, and this has to be less than 600. I think they maybe changed it to 1,000 volts. You know, the panel, this puts out 36 volts, 72 volts, 3 times that. The panel is in series, the voltage adds up. And it used to be the National Electric Code was less than 600 volts, but now it's, I think, 1,000, and 1,500 is coming. So this DC voltage goes to inverter, and it inverts it to AC, and then lockable disconnect and meter. And again, you should feed this in down here. Now this is a kind of a hybrid system. What happened is these inverters, because of all the electronics in it, were failing. And for me, they're failing, but I have a 15-year warranty, which is automatic, and they're replacing them. And they've since upgraded the system to be more robust. This company still has some electronics at the panel, and these are called optimizers, these things right here. This is an Israeli company, and these are called optimizers. It's a much smaller box, you know, with electronics. They still have these connected in series, so to where this is 300 volts coming into the inverter, but they sort of control how this system produces with these optimizers. If you get a shade on one part of this system, it takes down everything, because the same current goes through each of the squares on here. The same current, you know, goes through all these squares, and if you block out a few squares of silicon, it shuts down the amps. That's not the case with these two systems. With optimizers and microinverters, if this guy gets shaded significantly, this guy doesn't produce. But it doesn't take down the whole system, so to speak.
You said that was with microinverters and what?
This is, it's SolarEdge, and it's I don't know what the generic word for that is, but SolarEdge is the best bang for the buck these days. I mean, it could change next year, but they're beating out these people in terms of the dollar per watt. But you got to have a give. The point I want to make is that there's an entry level cost for this type system. It's $210, one panel, one microinverter. For this system, you got to buy, say, a 3,000 watt inverter right here, because they only come in particular sizes, right? And there's a minimum voltage you have to feed this, and I don't remember the minimum number of panels. In other words, you might get away with 6 panels, but could grow the system to 15 panels. Don't ignore the numbers. You understand my point? Yeah.
It's scalable, but you have to start off at a larger investment.
Yeah, you have to. That's exactly what I mean. Yeah, I mean, you're buying a 3,000 watt inverter, and you've got a minimum number of panels, and you have to go online and look at what the minimum voltage coming into this thing is. I know it's no more than 300, but I don't remember what the minimum voltage is. And anyway, let's take a break, and we'll go out and look at a panel. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Just a quick question, and you may or may not be able to answer this, but these solar roofs that Tesla is counting right now, do you know if they work in a similar manner as these?
We haven't seen one here yet in Houston. I know one of the installers from Solar City. Is that what it is? Yeah. And I haven't seen one yet, and so I don't know how they're connected electrically. I really don't. I think it's a system like this. I doubt if it's a system like this, but I just don't know yet. Yeah. Any other questions? Then we'll go out and look at a panel in the truck. Okay. And unfortunately, we got clouds in the sky, and have you look at the label on the back. I showed a picture. So this is a 235 watt monocrystalline, and this is I don't know which is which, and the things that are important is what's called closed circuit, short circuit, closed circuit current, and open circuit voltage. You'll see that right there. And Tim, will you hold this panel, and maybe somebody on this side, and I'll get a voltmeter. Voltage in a second, but you can see a little, actually tilt it down to where it sees the sunlight somewhat, and we'll get a much better spark here. Well, maybe a little bit lower. Maybe the cloud is obscuring it. You see, I've done this several times and it melts the copper. And this is only 36 volts. It's not going to, as long as I don't have an open sore. I'll show you a video when we get back in. There we go.
There you go.
It's because the
It's copper.
yeah. I like playing with fire. Anybody afraid of electricity? There we go. Thank you. And these don't care about the polarity.
You want us to tilt it back to give you some?
No, the voltage comes up right away.
Okay.
And you'll see 31.8. And this
32.
says open circuit voltage is 37. Tilt it back. Let's see whether it changes more.
Maybe
Yeah, it's yeah, yeah.
Another volt and a half.
Yeah. I'm surprised it's not. Maybe this is dirty. Yeah, try out something else while you're here. Maybe step around the front. So this is,
Shaded?
I got it, yeah. This is 60 cells, and you look very carefully and see the wires go underneath right here, and these wires go underneath. So all these are connected in series, and there's a half a volt per square. Half a volt times 60 is 30 volts, so that's where you get the output voltage. And you can actually follow these traces. This is probably plus or minus, and this goes down there, and there's a bus bar down there. And it comes up here, and there's a bus bar right here, and it goes down there and comes back. You see how they're all connected in series? Yeah. And they're pretty robust, you know?
You keep doing that, I'm gonna quit holding this. Can I practice my karate?
I'm going to show you something right now. Can you set it back in front? Yeah. And they're, there's plus and minus.
MC4.
MC, Michael, Charlie. MC4 connector. And they got a little O-ring right there to prevent water from getting in.
Okay, where's the plus and minus? I
Saw
one contact on there.
It's actually written on here somewhere. See, there's a plus right there. Physically get in there.
Right there, that metal inside the center of that should be conducting.
Okay, so there's another piece
That one's
outside of the
slide,
center.
No, this is one wire and this is the other wire.
Yeah.
There's only one wire.
That's your negative and positive.
So the center one is one of the polarities, and there's an outside contact.
No, there's only one wire there.
One polarity on it.
5.69, but this is the average for the year. So this panel will produce, 250, 235 times that on an average day, and multiply it times 365, and that'll be the production. And that's where this number came from right here, right? What it saves you.
Now, this would change from one panel to another, from one manufacturer to another, or from one...
No, it won't, because the watts, a panel...
No, I know the formula is not going to change. The values.
Well, if you got a 250 watt panel, different from 235 watts.
And is that like the main selection criteria that you would use when
Watts.
you're buying these
Right.
panels?
And you'll note, you probably didn't see it, but it says 235 watts plus 5 minus 0. All panels aren't equal, but they guarantee that this will be at least 235 watts. That's minus 0, but it could be 245 watts, right?
Thank you.
And that's another thing. I already erased the other thing over here. Remember I said the same current goes through each of these. If one of these is producing more current than the other one, it's the panel with the minimum output that paces the whole system. So that's the reason you have, if you have 10 panels that are 245 and one more that's 235, the system effectively is 11 panels times 235.
As I understood, it was for that system, for the in-phase system, not for the solar range.
Yeah, that's correct. No, I mean, these two are equivalent. It was that other system that I had over on the
So
other
if
end.
they are installed in series,
Mhm.
then the limitation, the bottleneck will be the smallest.
No, there's no, well, if you have leaves that cover this one, this system compensates. It doesn't take out everything as it did in the system that already raced. And the same is true of here. If this one gets covered, it'll take this one out, but it won't take the rest of them out. And that's clear. So,
About your diagrams, I noticed between the panels and the controllers, you have two lines. Is that representing
the two wires from the panel.
a positive and a negative is in the DC
Right,
transmission?
right. So I was going to explain MPPT, maximum power point tracking. It's built into all inverters. This is an IV curve, current voltage curve of a panel. And I put several of them here because the amount of sunlight might be more or less, right? So the panel always operates on this curve, and it's the job of the inverter to determine where on the curve I want to be. And power is current times voltage. So if the operating point is right here, the rectangle represents the power. And you can see that if the operating point were down here, the area of this rectangle is less than the area of this rectangle. So the inverter always sweeps the curve to find out the best operating point. And that's what maximum power point tracking means. It's built into the inverters, MPPT. And when I did open circuit voltage, I was measuring the voltage at this point. And when I did short circuit current, I was measuring the current at this point. But that's not exactly true because there was a spark, and you can't, if I have a spark, there's power. So you can't say that the voltage was zero. I have yet to figure that out. But let me show you another video. Let me see if we get the light. I took two panels to the Boy Scout Jamboree. Let me see if I can find that. Yeah, I get invited by the Boy Scouts, and so this is 500 watts, and I'm going to strike an arc. This is the same thing.
Because it's all melted. That's a good arc. That's about 60 volts. And we put the fire out.
This was two panels in series, so it made a little bit bigger spark. But I'm not entirely sure, how much power is in that arc, because I don't know where I was on the IV curve.
So
Okay,
you have a microinverter for each individual panel.
that's correct.
Okay, now, do they all tie into a motherboard converter
No.
on your transfer switch? You gotta have everything's gotta land somewhere.
Well, in this case, I would have up to 17 of these microinverters in series, and this would go to a 220 volt outlet. But I got to make sure the wires between here
Feed 220 volts your side.
put power back through the plug. I'm generating power and it's going back through this plug. But you got to make sure that the wires between here and the breaker box can carry the amps, right? One of these, a panel is 250 watts, right? The voltage is 240, so there's essentially 1 amp coming out of this thing at 220 volts. Does that make sense? And this wire is number 12, and number 12 is good for 20 amps. So they maximize, they say, no more than 17 amps flowing on this wire. We'll talk about it if there's, yeah. Let me, any other questions? Let me sort of talk about some more stuff on the handout. We talked about this curve for a particular day. Let me actually go to the internet and see whether I can. As I mentioned to someone, this is my curve for probably yesterday. No, that's today. I have an electric car, and I program it to turn on at 1 o'clock. And this is the load, 4,000 watts at 1. And then I'm going along. This is, I think, my refrigerator turning on and off. These little humps right here. And they're up here too, but they're superimposed on this big curve. And this is when my solar starts producing right here. And apparently this is kind of a cloudy day at home. And the shaded area is, this area is the accumulated area under the curve. For the engineers, it's the integral. You know, the integral area on this curve is growing, you know. It's constant. It actually is slightly increasing right here because of this little fluctuation. But I mentioned to somebody I use something that listens to my smart meter. Smart meters transmit via Zigbee, I think. I'm going to turn this. So it listens and reports the data to this company, and my microinverters also report production to this website. And the device that listens to my smart meter is from Rainforest Automation. Let me get back to this one. So we talked about this. This is the same as the chart I had on the blackboard. You know, the different styles of inverters and the pros and cons. Let me see, can I close that? Yeah, I think I can. We went to PV watts, and I showed you how to draw a system at your residence and estimate what the kilowatt hours per year is and the value of the energy produced and the return on investment. This is another way of looking at this. You can read it, but there's a couple of rules of thumb. Take a monthly bill and multiply it times 9 to get the array size. And then how much area will that array take up? And there's another rule of thumb there. Has anybody heard of Power to Choose website? Yeah. This is where you can compare all electricity plans. And I just keyed in where I live. Let me see what I can make this smaller. Apparently I can't make it smaller. So I'm going to view results, and I just want to point out a couple of things. So I can buy power for as little as 4 cents per kilowatt hour. And you can change your energy provider on this website. But note, and this is the thing, if you use less than 1,000, you're going to pay 8 cents per kilowatt hour. And if you use more than 2,000, you're going to pay 10.2 cents per kilowatt hour. My wife has a cousin who's divorced and pays alimony, and he goes out and looks at his meter every month, and if he hadn't reached the 1,000 to 2,000, he turns on everything, opens the doors, and to drive his electric bill up. Right? Hey, Marshall. So, and then these are all sorted. But one thing I want to point out to you, you can filter the results here. And if I'm going to choose 100% renewable energy, what I buy, I'm only the best plan starts at 4.9 cents per kilowatt hour. So buying green energy is not much more expensive than, you know. Oh yeah, there's one other thing I want to, you see this button at the very top called renewable energy. This has the companies that will reimburse you when you turn the meter backwards. And Green Mountain is one of them here. Come on.
Yeah, with Green Mountain and Reliant, there's no cap. In fact, I've got one client, he didn't fill out all of his paperwork with Reliant, and he finally did like a year later, and I can show everybody if you want to see it, but he's got a credit worth like $500. So
Oh, yeah.
obviously, if there was a 500 kilowatt hour cap, that would
Sure. Yeah. So, and I've tried to let these people know, but go ahead.
But you're rarely going to carry more than 500. But
Yeah, I'm trying to understand how the meter works. I mean, does it simply go back and reduce your consumption?
Well, let me
Or
tell
does
you.
it keep track of how much you consumed and how much
Yeah, I can't pull up a picture of it, but there's several, there's a liquid crystal display. Register 01 shows what comes into the house, and register 29 shows what goes out of the house. And I used to go out and read it every morning. And it's, if you don't have renewables, that register is going to show 0 until you install some solar. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So you still have to pay a monthly charge for the line usage and taxes and so forth?
I don't. I go for months without paying anything. And, you know, you got to read the small print because there is a charge from CenterPoint. But I haven't paid, I probably paid something in January. But I don't know. Marshall, do you have any comments on that?
yeah, so as you mentioned, with companies like Reliant, those are the really only two companies that provide full net metering in the full sense of the term. And it's inclusive of all services and tax. I'm happy to show Bill, bills that I have, clients that it's, they send them a credit notice. It's not a bill, which is nice. It says, don't pay us. We owe you $50 and or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do they only give credit, or will they actually give you money?
They only give credit.
No.
If you move house or something like that.
No, you can request payment.
You can, but I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to do. I mean, just because.
Well, it may be at the end of the year.
Yeah. Typically, it's just when because I mean that money's just.
If you
sitting,
get
right?
so much credit at one time, you want to.
Right, but it's like
Right.
otherwise.
But, I mean, you have to understand your load varies depending on the air conditioning, and you wouldn't want to say in April, oh, I've accumulated $300 worth of credit, but then knowing it's going to be blown away when you turn your air conditioning on. In other words, that's my,
I agree with you, but like if you over-design your system.
yeah, no.
Well, we don't do that.
Well, and he's not going to tell you why. It's because it costs more money, and that
Yeah.
he won't make the sale if they over-design it. But if you do Green Mountain, I mean, I maintain since they've eliminated this $500 per kWh per month cap, that you can consider, with a 9% ROI or 7% ROI, you can build a system twice of what you need, and it's a good return on investment. Especially if you spend less for doing the upfront cost, so to speak.
In the cases where you're generating more power than you're using, is the utility using that on the grid? Are they somehow?
It's going somewhere.
Okay.
It's less demand on the power plant
And so
because,
their way to compensate you is just to give you a credit? Is that what that is?
yeah. And in the case of Green Mountain, they pay you what you pay per kilowatt hour. Yeah. So let me go back to the notes here. Power to choose, we just visited that. I can go visit the net metering, the smart meter Texas. SMA. Smart meter Texas, and maybe I don't have to put in my password, and maybe it won't take forever. Waiting. So there's a couple of days lag on this right here. There's my day, and this was 6:29, so that was yesterday. Again, there's where I charge my electric car. Okay, this is a different scale. This is not watts, this is kilowatt hours. And this doesn't show what I produced. It's only what came in through the meter, not what I exported. So, and this where, if you want to add a device to listen to your smart meter, you have to register it here. And I did it.
So yours is registered to the site, and then you pull in each register that shows what you produce, what you consume, whatever else.
Right, right.
And you pull that into your home information.
Actually, I export, you know, I don't do anything. I've set it up to where this website in Australia that shows that it gets the data. And I don't know, you know, it's above my understanding the way the internet works. So let me scroll down a little bit more. So this is where you see what's required by the city of Houston. And all jurisdictions are different in terms of what the code is to put solar on the house. It ranges from a horrible code in where I live that says solar can't be seen, and to a pretty good system with the city of Houston. City of Houston requires a master electrician pull the permit with documents showing how the system is laid out, and then a professional engineer to certify that, in his or her opinion, the panels aren't going to be blown away in a hurricane. And you know, you submit it. The City of Houston's trying to get it out in a week. You know, review the paperwork and say yay or nay, and if they say no, you got to change something. You know, maybe you left something out. And then this other button, Centerpoint, that shows what you have to do to register with Centerpoint. I might add that if you download an electronic copy of these notes, and let me go to show you where that is. It's at Houston Renewable. It's where you signed up for this class. You can get the notes right here. And if you download the notes, you don't have to, you know, you just click on a URL and it'll take you there. So on and so forth. I mean, it just saves a little bit of effort. So, permitting in the city of Houston. Marshall, do you happen to know, did the wind speed increase from 110 miles per hour?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I mean, we install at the same standard as we go on the coast, which is 139 category 3.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, as far as permitting, I think it's still 110.
Okay. What Marshall's saying is that when you get near the coast, the wind load speed requirements, is it on the other side of the intercoastal canal, or where is it exactly?
If you pull up, you can actually pull it up here, it's the TDI, if you Google search TDI windstorm map, you can see, so it's basically, it's pretty much outside of Harris County, everything southeast of 59, more or less. Yeah, so everything in red, yellow, and blue, we have to get. So you actually have to pay, you know, about $1,200 more for a professional engineer to certify its TDI compliant.
Just because the wind speed is 130.
That's right.
Okay. So, but in Houston area,
Yeah, it's just 100.
it's 110, he says. I mentioned, well, I say local source, but I know this list is outdated. I'd like to show you something about racking. And Iron Ridge is a racking manufacturer, one of many, and this is for a roof. So you're up on an asphalt shingle roof, and you slide this up under asphalt shingles. First you pop a chalk line on the roof where you want to install these, and then line the chalk mark up with these right here, and then screw the lag screw in that hits a rafter. The pull-out strength of these is well known depending on the type of wood. And then you screw this in here and then put this on. And again, this is one of many types. So you'll have a whole series of these. And usually 2 of these per panel is good enough. And then this is the rail that gets bolted right here. So there's a long rail here and another rail down here, and the panel sits on these rails. That's how you mount it to the roof. And then
These rails are plastic?
no, they're anodized aluminum. Aluminum, but it's anodized, and anodized aluminum doesn't conduct electricity. Aluminum does, and so this is called a ground clamp right here, and I'll pass it around. It bolts in here, and you run a bare copper wire through here. But I'll pass this around. You'll note there's some serrations on the bottom of this T-nut here, and it breaks the anodized to where there is a path for electricity to flow.
Bonding ground, series all of them together.
Yeah. And I don't know, how did you do bonding ground in the old, at least as an electrician?
It's something similar, like put a lug and just, bond everything together.
Okay. Sure. I'm only showing this. I'm not partial to this company, but they sent me something to show, so I show it. Then I want to show another thing. Let me take this.
What's the name of this?
This is Iron Ridge. Another manufacturer is Unirac. And there are distributors in Houston that carry all this stuff. Ontility is one of them.
Who?
Ontility. Let me see. I was going to show you this right here. So this is a device used to see what shading is going to do to your installation. And you go up on the roof or the location where you plan to put the panels, and you orient this in a certain north-south direction. And I think you put this on here like this and hold it level. There's a little bubble level in here, and I can see the shadow of whatever's out there, whether it be a roof or a tree or whatever, right? The shadow on here, and I put this in here and I trace the edge of the shadow. And I just happened to do this in my backyard before and after I cut down some trees. And before I cut the trees, all of this area over here was blocked by the sun, right? And then I cut down the trees, and the new line was right here. And it just so happened I gained about 33% by cutting down the trees. And that's something that we all have to deal with. Shadow from the neighbor, shadow from a tree. And if anybody ever wants to borrow this, they're welcome. Let me see. Yep. Okay. So let me see where we're at now here. Tristan, you turn out that light here? Yeah, thanks. We talked about an IV curve a little bit. Maximum power point. Panels, I've seen them as low as 25 cents a watt. Racking, maybe 33 cents per watt, right? The amount of aluminum rail and the things that you connect to the roof. Value of solar, we talked about the payback time. We talked about the return on investment That is merely the reciprocal of that.